A Bugatti Chiron costs $3 million. New. That's not a typo. $3 million. It produces 1,500 horsepower from a 16-cylinder engine the size of a small bathtub. It can reach 304 miles per hour. Only 500 were ever built, each one assembled by hand by fewer than 20 technicians inside a factory in Molsheim, France, a town most people have never heard of and couldn't find on a map. Then someone crashed one. Not a fender bender, not a parking lot scrape, a real crash. The kind that makes engineers go quiet when they see the photos. The kind that insurance companies look at and immediately write a single word in their report. Totaled. Most people would walk away. Most people would call a salvage yard, pocket whatever they could, and never think about it again. Matt Armstrong didn't do that. He bought the wreck. He pointed a camera at it. And what happened next became one of the most watched automotive projects in the history of YouTube. But here's the question nobody is actually asking, should it have happened at all? A machine built to those tolerances, damaged that severely, is putting it back on the road brave, or is it reckless? That's not a rhetorical question. Drop your honest answer in the comments, because by the end of this, your answer might change. Before you understand what Armstrong did, you need to understand what he bought. The Bugatti Chiron is not a car in the way a Toyota Camry is a car. It shares a category with it the same way a commercial jet shares a category with a paper airplane. The W16 engine, 16 cylinders arranged in a W configuration, has 4 turbochargers. Not 2, 4. It produces so much heat that Bugatti built a separate cooling circuit for each turbo bank. The transmission is a 7-speed dual-clutch unit that can shift in under 150 milliseconds. The brakes are carbon ceramic discs that cost more than most new family cars. The chassis is a monocoque, a single structural shell made from carbon fiber, meaning the body and the frame are the same thing. You can't separate them. You can't just unbolt the damaged parts and weld in new ones. Carbon fiber doesn't work that way. It fractures under stress rather than bending, and once it fractures, the structural integrity of the entire shell is compromised in ways that aren't always visible to the naked eye. That's what Armstrong walked into. The car arrived at his workshop on a flatbed. Witnesses described the front end as collapsed. The airbags had deployed, all of them. Fluid had leaked from multiple systems. The bodywork, which on a Chiron is made from components that each cost tens of thousands of pounds individually, was destroyed across multiple panels. But the bodywork was the least of anyone's concerns. Matt Armstrong's background matters here. He's not a factory-trained Bugatti technician. He's a British car enthusiast and content creator who built his platform on salvage supercar flips, buying damaged high-value cars, rebuilding them, and documenting the process. Before the Chiron, he'd worked on Lamborghinis, McLarens, a Ferrari or two. He understood supercar engineering. He'd developed relationships with independent specialists. But this was a different category of problem entirely. He knew that. He bought it anyway. The first inspection report landed like a verdict. The monocoque chassis, the backbone of the entire car, had sustained visible damage. On a standard steel-framed car, that's bad. On a carbon fiber monocoque, it's potentially the end. Carbon fiber is extraordinary under the loads it's designed for. Compression, tension, lateral forces within predictable parameters, it handles all of it better than steel at a fraction of the weight. But when those parameters are exceeded in an impact, the fiber matrix can crack internally, not just on the surface, through the structure. And internal carbon fractures don't always show up in a visual inspection. They require specialist scanning equipment. Even then, the results are open to interpretation. Bugatti's official position on this is unambiguous. If the structural tub of a Chiron is compromised, the car is a write-off. Not a repair project, a write-off. The company has stated publicly that they do not support or warranty any Chiron that has undergone structural repair. Full stop. There's a reason for that. A car that looks right and drives right can still be structurally compromised. At 200 miles per hour, the forces acting on that chassis are enormous. A hairline fracture that causes zero problems at 60 miles per hour can propagate catastrophically at speed. Bugatti's engineers know this. Their position isn't PR caution. It's physics. But Armstrong wasn't planning to take it to 200. He was planning to make it run. Those are different goals, and the distinction mattered. Beyond the chassis, the inspection team worked through every major system. The hydraulic suspension, which actively adjusts ride height and stiffness in real time, had been disrupted. The W16 engine itself had survived the impact with its block intact, which was considered something close to miraculous given the scale of the damage. But intact block and ready-to-run engine are not the same thing. The oil system needed full assessment. Contamination, pressure loss, potential metal fragments from secondary damage. Each one a potential engine killer if missed. The cooling system, 3 separate radiators, 1 central and 2 in the rear haunches, needed to be checked circuit by circuit. The ECU, Bugatti's proprietary engine management system, had thrown a cascade of fault codes on the one portable diagnostic tool Armstrong's team could access. Some codes they could read. Some they couldn't. Bugatti's full diagnostic software is not publicly available. It lives in factory-authorized service centers. Armstrong's garage in the UK is not one of them. He was working partially blind, and the clock was running. Getting the Chiron to a point where a start could even be attempted took weeks. Not days, weeks. The process wasn't dramatic in the way YouTube thumbnails suggest. It was methodical, systematic, panel by panel, circuit by circuit, system by system. Armstrong and his team, a rotating cast of independent specialists, each brought in for their specific expertise, worked through the car the way investigators work through a crash site. Slowly, without assumption. The fuel system had to be purged and refilled. The W16 requires a specific fuel pressure threshold before the ECU will allow cranking. The brake-by-wire system, the Chiron has no traditional mechanical brake linkage. It's all electronic, needed recalibration. The 7-speed DSG transmission had its own fault codes, its own requirements. There's a sequence the Chiron systems follow on startup. The ECU runs through a self-check protocol. If any system reports outside its acceptable parameters, the car doesn't start. It's not a suggestion. It's a hard shutdown. Bugatti built it that way deliberately. A car producing 1,500 horsepower with a faulty system isn't a car with a fault. It's an explosion waiting to find a direction. The first start attempt failed. The second failed. The third, Armstrong described the sound in his video as something between a bark and a roar. The W16 caught, held, stumbled, and then steadied into an idle. 16 cylinders turning over in a damaged workshop in England. The temperature gauges climbed. Oil pressure registered. The car was running. The comments section of the video that captured that moment reads like a live feed of collective disbelief. Thousands of people watching in real time, typing in capital letters, tagging friends. Some of them were automotive engineers. Some of them were teenagers who'd never looked under a hood. None of them had expected that sound. Here's the thing about channels that document a process this granular: the setbacks, the failures, the actual technical reality, rather than the cleaned-up highlight reel, they're rare. If that level of detail matters to you, the subscribe button keeps you inside the investigation. The next stage of the story doesn't get easier. Running and driving are two different things. Armstrong knew that before the engine even fired. Getting the car mobile, actually pointing it at a road and moving it under its own power, required solving 3 new problems that emerged the moment the engine came to life. The active suspension system, even partially recalibrated, was producing inconsistent readings across the 4 corners. The car was sitting unevenly, not dramatically, but enough that high-speed driving was out of the question. The transmission, despite clearing most of its fault codes, was refusing to engage certain gears. And the steering, the Chiron uses an electro-hydraulic power steering system with its own control unit, was responding with a lag that nobody on the team was comfortable with. So, the first drive wasn't what anyone had imagined. It wasn't a dramatic blast down an empty road. It was a careful, slow-speed test. Armstrong behind the wheel, the team watching from the side, everyone alert for anything that sounded, felt, or smelled wrong. The car moved, under its own power. A $3 million wreck that every insurance assessor had written off, that Bugatti's official position said should not exist in running condition, moved down a private road in England. There's a legal dimension here that most coverage glosses over. In the United Kingdom, a salvage-titled vehicle, a car that has been declared a write-off by an insurer, cannot simply be returned to the road. It must pass an inspection, in some cases an individual vehicle approval test, depending on the extent of the rebuild. The insurance implications are significant. Getting coverage for a rebuilt Chiron is not a straightforward process. The car's history follows it. Armstrong addressed this publicly, acknowledging the legal and logistical complexity without pretending it didn't exist. That transparency is part of what made the project credible. He wasn't claiming to have produced a factory-standard Chiron. He was claiming to have brought a dead car back to life, and being honest about the gap between those two things. Think about that for a second, not in automotive terms, in human terms. Think about the last time you committed to something that everyone around you said was beyond repair. A relationship, a career, a version of yourself you damaged. The outcome never looks like the original. It can't. But the act of trying, the decision to not walk away, changes what you're capable of believing. Armstrong's project resonates with people who have never touched a Bugatti because it taps into something they recognize from their own life. Some things shouldn't be fixable. Some things get fixed anyway. Now pull back. Look at the full picture. The Chiron ran. It moved. By any reasonable measure, the project succeeded in its stated goal. But the broader question, what does this actually prove, is more complicated than the highlights suggest. The salvage hypercar market is a real and growing thing. Damaged Chirons, Koenigsegg's, Pagani's, cars that cost millions new, do end up in salvage auctions. The buyers are a specific type. Wealthy enthusiasts, content creators, specialist rebuilders, and occasionally investment buyers who believe the car's rarity makes even a damaged example worth something. The economics vary wildly. Armstrong's acquisition cost for the Chiron has never been publicly confirmed, but salvage hypercars of this type have sold at auction for anywhere between 15% and 40% of their original value, depending on damage severity. The rebuild cost, parts, labor, specialist fees, and lost time add significantly on top. The channel economics are easier to calculate. The Bugatti Chiron series generated tens of millions of views across multiple videos. At even conservative CPM rates for automotive content, that translates to substantial ad revenue. More importantly, it generated brand value that no single video figure can capture. Armstrong's subscriber count, his sponsorship profile, his position in the automotive content space, all of it moved because of this project. But Bugatti AG never commented. Not publicly. Not on the rebuild, not on the outcome. Their official position that the car should not exist in running condition stands unchanged. The car has never been independently dyno-tested post-rebuild. Nobody outside Armstrong's team knows what it actually produces. Nobody has verified whether the chassis passed any formal structural integrity assessment. The car is running. The questions around it are still open. And that's the detail that doesn't fit neatly into a success story. Armstrong didn't restore Chiron. He resurrected something that Bugatti believes cannot be safely resurrected. Maybe he's right, and they're overcautious. Maybe the car runs fine, and will continue to run fine. Or maybe there's a stress fracture in that carbon tub that no one can see, in a car that once produced 1,500 horsepower, and the story isn't finished yet. Matt Armstrong isn't the only person who bought something a manufacturer said was finished. There's another story, a different hypercar, a different country, and a manufacturer that didn't stay silent. They took legal action to stop the rebuild entirely. That case, and what it revealed about how car companies really feel about who owns their machines after they leave the factory, that's the next investigation. It's already on this channel.